Sassy. So this is Melissa from Catch the Buzz.
And Tom from Sassy Girl Dad.
And our guests are...
This is Scott from Nursery Leaders Unite.
And I'm Courtney from Expounding Scripture.
So it's date night again with The Chosen. And so last time we did a live stream for the first 2 episodes, I guess, 1 and 2 of The Chosen, season 5, The Last Supper. And now we're doing episodes 3, 4, and 5. That's part 2 of The Chosen Last Supper. So, anyways, yeah. So how'd you guys feel about it?
It was good. There, you could feel the intensity of the last week of his life. My most favorite parts were probably when he was chastising the Pharisees. That was so good. I loved every part of that. And then it was I just loved seeing the humanness of the apostles and like relating to them and how hard and confusing it must be, because it kind of seems like they're still not grasping what's actually going on. They're still waiting for like their freedom from Rome. And Christ is trying to tell them as plainly as possible, like, no, that's not what it's about, So that's what I got from it, or what was sticking out to me.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. It's definitely the middle of the season, the middle of the story. So there's lots of questions going unanswered and being answered at the end. There's a cliffhanger that's really fun. But so the way it picks up is right at the end, I guess, of the temple cleansing. And that scene is really fun to see because you can tell that all the different groups are starting to realize what's going on, and then everybody has to react to the temple cleansing and then what Christ is doing, which is, if you want to view it as fulfilling his mission or sabotaging his mission or whatever, Christ is definitely going pretty hard in the paint. So once he does that, I was expecting that to be kind of the highlight, I guess, of part 2, and it wasn't. It was later when he's in the courtyard of the temple, and there's a small group around, and then he has the Pharisees start questioning him, as we're familiar with in the Bible. And when Christ gets animated, he starts yelling at the Pharisees, and it's nuts. Like I was pretty overwhelmed. I was like, oh my gosh, this is too much. I can't watch this. But at the same time, I was like, don't stop. Just keep going. I could hear this all day long. I just want this to be ringing in my ears for weeks. It was so cool. It was so cool to hear that performance and see how that went down with so much passion. And then to see that really is kind of, the nail in the coffin, all puns intended. I mean, that was the moment when Christ realized it was over, when several of the apostles were like, yeah, we're done now. And other apostles that were confused were like, where do we go from here? Yeah, I thought that was really cool. Really cool.
What do you think, Tom?
Along the same lines, one of the things, though, that I noticed, particularly at the beginning when he confronts them, is how nonchalantly fearful they were about it. It was almost like they were like they wanted to say something more to him, but they didn't know what to say.
The Pharisees?
Speechless. And then
he's asking the Pharisees?
The Pharisees, yes.
Yeah.
Like they didn't even really debate him on the fact of the accusations that he's making of them. At least not in front of the people. Of course, afterwards, they're, behind the temple wall, discussing about how terrible it is and they can't believe he did that and all this other stuff, and that's when the conniving starts, and I was just like, I can see that totally being the case and how it happened. Again, like it to me, it brought the realism to the story, which is what The Chosen has done.
Well, I liked the part where Pilate, he's being troubled while he's getting a massage, and he's flops himself down. Fine, I'm gonna have to do something and stuff. But what I love too, though, is about I think a lot of the point of the show too is that you're supposed to be able to see yourself, in a lot of the different characters in different situations. And I mean, in the apostles and stuff, people sit there and like think about themselves and they'll be like, oh, well, I'm just not really recognizing what's going on, like not a very spiritual person, or I don't understand Jesus or whatever. But here the apostles were with Christ and they're like not getting it sometimes. And so I'm like, does he not have grace for us? Because look what he was dealing with. I mean, it says in scripture that they were like not getting it, right? But I think that's also that extension for us as parents with our kids to be like, okay, they aren't getting stuff, but sometimes it's not because they don't care, they're not paying attention. Like, we got to present it a different way. Or, even for ourselves, there's times when we don't understand things, but there's like a time and a season for things. And so to me, it is like a show of like, have grace for yourself. Like, he plans on us messing up, plans on us figuring out. And like, I always tell this to missionaries. I'm like, Christ wants you every day. He wants you the first day of your mission, and he wants you the last day of your mission because he needs you and he wants you. And I think that for me, it's like to be told that you're wanted is important, and to me that, like Mary Magdalene in the very beginning, he's like, he's like, I've called you by your name or something like that. And he's like, you are mine. And so to me, I'm like, even for people, if they only watch the first episode of The Chosen and they feel something from that, and it's like mission accomplished. They want you to watch more than that. But like, if you feel that Christ loves you, that God loves you, then, exclamation point,
Yeah, there's several things that The Chosen has done successfully. One of the things is to get people interested in a story that at times feels very removed from us. And the other thing I think they do really well is they bring enough context into the story to make it real and present. And so it's when you watch The Chosen, it's very hard to impose your 21st century mind into what's going on, because they do such a good job with all the different cultural cues, the traditions, the food, the gestures, they get the accents and the clothes, and even the context of Passover being socially overwhelming. You've got all the different people there and the different types of people, Romans and Israelites and whatnot. So they do a great job with that.
I've really enjoyed the cultural learning, the traditions of like the holidays, like seeing the Passover, and when I don't remember what it's called, but when they were doing if you only did this and not this, it would be enough. Like, that touched my heart so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember what they call it. It was sort of with a D.
Diocese or something like that.
Yes.
Diocese.
Yes, and it was so beautiful just seeing the culture. They've just done such a good job. The script is written so beautifully. The culture stuff is so amazing. Like just their attention to detail is so beautiful and so powerful. And I've seen videos of people talking about how like Jews, for example, who have watched The Chosen and now are like becoming Christian because of The Chosen. And that has been amazing to see. Like, just it's reaching so many people.
Yeah.
And whoever you are, if you put something in the comments, we'll read it. By the way. Anyways. Yeah, and that's the thing is too, is it's like, it's amazing how it's reached out to so many people. And I know I heard that, I believe it was during the time of COVID. I know that I had watched them before, but I really watched more during that time and was all caught up with whatever The Chosen had, because it came out in 2017. I was seeing, and then but I think that I'm quite sure that during the time of COVID is when it really, people were home, they weren't busy doing other things, and so they were watching lots of stuff. I know a lot of Jewish people came to know Yeshua, came to know Christ during that time. So, because to me, they were seeking out for God, and
Yeah.
I am.
Yeah, that's such a cool effort. They're kind of proselytizing or evangelizing the Israelites, Israelis, and Jewish community. Yeah, it's a lot of fun to see that, and I'm sure that if one of them were to watch this kind of a production, there's a lot of it that they would not be seeing for the first time. They would recognize. They'd recognize a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny.
Well, another thing I wanted to point out was the apostles, after they're coming back from Lazarus's house, and he kind of finally tells them that, I'm going to die. I'm leaving you guys for a time. And go back to where they've been staying, and they're all talking about, well, what does he really mean? Still not getting it, really. I mean, I think it becomes more real for them. But the one that really stood out to me was, well, why he earned the name Doubting Thomas. Because he took it a step farther in his verbiage of being like, did I just waste the last 2 years of my life?
Yeah.
And that this is not him? Is this not the Messiah that I thought that he was? And I was kind of gobsmacked a little bit that they were that blunt with it. But and then of course Judas takes it even a step farther. And Judas just made me mad.
Look, good job, didn't he? Props to Luke for doing so well. You have to remember to separate the person from the character.
Yeah, he did a pretty good job.
And I like how, of course, Mary Magdalene, she just had this feeling and was just, and I love how they portray all these characters, where you have the ones that is completely over their head, and then you have her and which one of the sons of thunder is it? The other one who's getting it.
I think it was John, right?
Yeah, Big John.
No, but this was the shorter one of the brothers.
Well, that's Andrew.
Oh, that is
No.
Andrew? No, it's not.
I thought it was John.
Isn't
it Big James?
There's
John?
Big James and Little John?
Because it's
yeah.
Is it Big James? No, I don't remember.
Yeah,
I know.
Is there two Jameses or two Johns?
I know his real name is George Xanthus. But unfortunately, this time that's not helping me with the character. I usually know the character name, but not the person name. But for whatever reason, I know George's name. But
yeah, I can see him in my mind. But they have the whole spectrum in the apostles. They have the one who's ready to betray, or getting there. The one who's not interested in betraying, but is now realizing that he's wasted a bunch of time. And then you have a bunch in the middle that are frustrated.
I'm wondering if they had done.
And then there's one that is on board. He speaks to Christ, he speaks to Mary, and he basically says, I know what's going on, and I'm too scared to even say what I think is going on. And Christ basically says, yeah, well, you're getting it.
Yeah.
And Mary says something very similar.
Oh, I love how Christ looks at Mary, and she's just saying how hard it is, and he's like, it's because you've been listening. And I really love that. The apostles are there, but they're so focused on the redemption from Rome that they don't even understand what he's been telling them. That has got to be so frustrating.
They still have this false narrative that he was going to come in and be this army general of sorts. That he was going to come and conquer all through military means.
He would be the Captain Moroni.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that he was going to take care of all their enemies and be crowned king. They're not realizing that it was more about spiritual warfare than it was about physical warfare in what he was doing.
Well, when you're so convinced that the law of Moses is what cleanses you and heals you, why would you look for anything else? You know, you wouldn't.
Right. Even when you were being told to.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Like, and
Yeah, I've often wondered about Christ's balance between the frustration you must feel for the apostles that are not getting it, but also the faith in the Father's plan, right? So Christ knows what's going on to whatever extent. He understands that the plan is moving forward and that he doesn't necessarily need to worry or be paranoid that everything's in the right place. Like everything's going to work out the way it's supposed to. And yet he's still, at times in the scriptures, he still has a frustration where he's telling the apostles, you're not getting this? Like, didn't I tell you? Like, why are you not getting this?
right.
And I've always wondered about that. How, if Christ really had perfect faith, not half God and half human. He's fully human and fully God. So the Father allows to have the faith that everything's going to work out, and his connection that he's working with the apostles is strong enough that he can feel frustrated and even sad that they're not getting it. You've been walking with me for these years, and you're just not picking these up. Like this is frustrating, and I still have faith.
Well, in us, we have so much repetition where people are like, "Oh, I've read the scripture so many times." I'm like, "Yeah, but look, the disciples were there and they didn't get it. You don't think that we need a few more chances to figure it out?" And they weren't with him for that long. If you've been a member of a church for years and you've been reading scriptures and stuff, there's seasons when something means something different than other times. Like I said, and this is a perfect example to me of like having read something so many times and it means something different. Like, your phase of life when you're like a parent, you read scripture and it's a little bit different. You feel and think about something differently because of what you've experienced. So I just love how they show that, like you said, how they show the range of perceptions. And to me, it's like the second coming things right now, where some people are like, "Oh, it's going to be forever," and they're like, they were saying, they're like, "Oh, well, maybe this isn't the Messiah, it'll be another." And you go like, how are you forgotten the miracles that he's done? I think that's part of the point of those, right? So you would like know, but
New, because when someone converts to a new church or new religion, or they're learning a new system, whether it's a system of belief or academics or whatever, we tend to give them quite a bit of grace. We give them room to figure it out. If you came up to somebody who had joined a new religion and was 3 years deep and was still struggling with things, you'd be like, okay, well, 3 years, I mean, that's you're new, so give yourself some time and you'll figure it out. And that's kind of what the apostles were dealing with. They were dealing with a conversion story to a religion that was just barely picking up in a lot of ways. And so 3 years really isn't that long. If if you're growing up in the religion and then you say, oh, we're going to go on a special project for this religion that you're already familiar with, 3 years would be a long time. But it was new for them, or most of it was new for them. And so that 3 years probably didn't feel like enough, because they kind of had a conversion.
I think also like Christ came and he like poked so many traditions. Like they had so many traditions, and Christ was like, what's the word I'm looking for? He was he was hard. Like it's so easy to get caught up in tradition and think that's the right thing when Christ is like, no, like you've missed the mark the whole time. You're like, oh crap, really?
Right.
And so it kind of reminds me of the Pharisees. That's also, I like to relate myself to the characters, and the Pharisees is what really, to be so hard-hearted and to think you are doing such a right thing just because of tradition, right? Like they knew the scriptures, they knew the tradition, and Christ comes and challenges that, and they're like, who are you? You're going against everything our God has taught us, and they just, it's like the frog in the water. When you turn it, you
Right.
put a frog in boiling water, he'll jump out, right? But it's like, it was so subtle. They didn't see how they have left the God of Israel because they turned the law into their God.
And the chosen is wise enough to include the one Pharisee that kind of gets it, right? Where he's like, no, this Christ guy has a point. We need to listen to him. I mean, maybe I don't agree with everything, but why are we trying to persecute him when what he's saying is actually true?
Yeah, like he's
Yeah.
not wrong. That's what people say now. They're not wrong.
And to me, he had a couple other supporters, but behind him too. But it just seems like, again, they were so focused on the tradition of everything, and the tradition, that they totally negate listening to the spiritual aspect of what they were talking about and why he was there, and just were not going to listen.
Another part that I thought was exciting, when they brought up Jeremiah, there was the temple cleansing, and they bring up Jeremiah just for a second. I mean, it was like maybe all of 15 seconds that they're talking about Jeremiah, and I thought that was so cool. That was so cool to see them include that, because it's such a good a good beginning to the explanation of how things got to where they were. It's like the perfect little segue of how the Jewish community at the time was not prepared, because they killed Jeremiah, and they admit it. They're like, who was the last one to do this? And they're like, it was Jeremiah. Well, what happened to him?
Yeah, we killed him.
Yeah. And like,
So
how do they know that they've done this before and this did not turn out very well, and maybe they should reconsider?
and then they're like, so what do we need to do? Well, we need to do the same thing we did to Jeremiah. It's like, oh my gosh, you guys are not getting it. I thought that was so cool.
Like, history repeats itself, guys.
Yeah, I remember that being one of my highlights.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love how they do show that range of like the religious people there, and how the different ways they're all seeing things, and that's what I appreciate with when people will talk about how like their own faith maybe doesn't allow them to ask questions and stuff, and how they feel kind of like shunned or unincluded. But I'm like, look, they were asking Christ questions. So, people are trying to learn and gain knowledge. Should they feel like they should be quiet and just sit back and not ask questions? I mean, I know that somebody was telling me about how in their culture and faith in Africa, the tradition was if your spouse died, and maybe it was all family members, but at least if it was your spouse had died, you would be with the body for like 3 days, because the spirit is supposed to be there still for 3 days. And my friend was like, that's crazy. Like, and he said that he was asking his different like priests or whatever. He was like, why do we do this? He's like, well, we just do it. He's like, is there a scripture or something? He's like, no, this is what we do. And he's like, this is like not healthy to be with a body for days and stuff. And so I think that's another thing of like tradition. It's like, what kinds of things, like Christ was trying to tell them. He's like, look what you're doing for your people. You're doing nothing. You're doing nothing for them, but actually hurting them even. And it was really something when you realize like they're going, it's a big deal for us to all leave the temple. It's like, well, yeah. And like they said, like the frog thing, It's not getting a bit at a time. And now you have this, it's a business being run, multiple businesses being run in there. It's not like they're just exchanging money and bringing the goats in through or something. They were handling all of it there, just like it was anywhere else. And so when I think, for me, it's like, it's one of those examples for people to be like, look what can happen to anything that matters to you as far as things that are sacred. A little bit at a time, like the whole thing can come down and be eroded because you stopped being faithful. You stopped being committed, and you just let whatever happen.
Also, like what fear can do to you, because they were living in fear under the Romans. Like they wanted to make
Yes.
sure they paid their stuff. They didn't want the Romans getting in their stuff. There was tension there. And so like it's so relatable, like what fear can do.
Like,
It's like, okay, so we need to make sure this is happening. Yeah, just come in. This is good. This will get people to pay the stuff, and maybe Rome will get off our backs. Like fear really does things to you.
Yeah, being in that like survival mode, like we just gotta do what we gotta do to get by. We just have to. I'm like, and that's that thing of Satan, like no agency, no choice. Like you just gotta do what you gotta do. You were born this way. This is how you are. This is the situation. Like it's fine.
So there's one part that maybe you guys can help clear up for me, because I was a little confused by it. And I'm not sure if there's any biblical record of this actually happening, but it is part of the show. So, is it Rama that died?
Yes.
Okay. Her father is obviously there in Jerusalem with a group of people who were purposely against Christ,
And causing
against
trouble.
Jesus, and causing trouble. They get arrested, like by force, by the Romans. Did anybody see a reason why that happened? I was very confused by that.
So technically, I don't think they got arrested, but it kind of looked that way. In the preview for part 3, it makes it seem like the Romans are recruiting them for their cause.
I kind of thought that might be the case, but I mean, the one guy they fight with, sure looked like they were getting arrested to me. But yeah, that could be.
Yeah, have their secret combinations.
Because they're still running into this problem where they've still got to have a way to convince the masses to
be persuaded
enough
to flip the other way.
I think that's what the setup was. I think that's what they were doing, is they were setting up like the whipping, like all those people were like, I can't believe it. So you can see that some of them are starting to turn against Christ. Then you have that group with Rama's father where he's trying to, outwardly get people to deny Christ. So to me, it seemed like that's where the storyline was going. It was setting up that free Barabbas, let Barabbas go and crucify Christ.
Yeah, I was wondering about that in part 1. Like, how are they going to get from the Son of David walking through the gates at Jerusalem, waving palms over their heads, cheering? They got to get from there to crucify him in 5 days, something like that. So how are they going to do that? And I wondered about that before, and I'd kind of seen some things in the scriptures where like, okay, maybe that's what happened. But for some reason in my head, the temple cleansing was not something that would have upset the people. It was something that would have upset, the Pharisees and stuff like that. But to see that portrayal and this gradual movement where Christ is being welcomed by the people, but the people turn on him pretty quick. As soon as he does something that they don't like, they're like, "Oh, no, that you're messing things up. You need to go away." And then he's sitting there lecturing the Pharisees, and the Pharisees are going back and forth with Christ, and it's not really clear that anybody is necessarily winning. At different times, it kind of seems like people are like, "Oh, boo to the Pharisees," and then other times they're saying boo to Christ, and it's hard because I think every one of us has that tendency of like if there's a conflict, do we back up the authority or do we back up the underdog because we feel like they have a good point?
Right.
Because either way, you're not really in a safe situation. So it'll be interesting to see how they play that out, but also think through,
Yeah.
How we
Well, I
all
think they
live that.
kind of already started that a little bit with the when he asked them the question about should we be giving gold to Rome, playing on the emotions of the people, because they obviously don't like paying taxes to Rome. And they kind of win some points, I think, in that question, even though Christ answered it the way he did. Give Rome what is Rome's and give God what's God's.
Mhm.
But people still focused on, well, he just said we were supposed to give gold to Rome. I don't like that.
Yeah.
So they're playing on that fear and that the hatred for the Romans to spin the story and what he said.
Yeah.
That tradition of thought and stuff, because like I say, the expectation they have of how things are going to be, and then they're not that way, and so like it. I remember we went to the Chosen conference. There was a pastor who was teaching on Sunday, and he was talking about how his daughter died, his little girl, and stuff. He said, if your God can't disappoint you, he's not really your God. Because he's like, it was hard. He's like, our little girl died, and I was like, is he still my God? Do I still believe? Or is this gonna end it all for me? And so I think that's one of those things to look at. And as they show really well in the show, like he healed some, but he didn't heal all, and that happens now. Some people get cancer and miraculous healing, and some die or some suffer for a long time, and we don't know exactly why all those things happen. But I know that was like a really crucial thing that they brought up was why some have to suffer and continue to suffer, and why some are just given a mercy and healing.
Yeah, that's a good point too.
Yeah, I just appreciate that it invites so much internal reflection.
Right.
Of okay, am I a Pharisee? Like, where do I get stuck in tradition, especially in LDS culture, right? There is a lot of tradition. One of my favorite movies is RM because
Yeah.
it's just like all the
A great movie.
oh, it's so funny. And like it's like, okay, so where do I still get stuck? And what has the Lord been trying to tell me? But I'm just like, Lord, let me tell you what the law says, or let me tell you what culture or tradition says. You're wrong. And he's like, oh, little Courtney. And, or how am I like, doubtful Tom? How am I like Judas and I betray my God? Like it's so important to see those things in yourself, but to see it with kindness and compassion, like, because I think Christ did. He was frustrated, but I think he also had a lot of compassion for it, and still does.
Well, it's like the talk that we had at conference and stuff, where she's like, your worth is still here to God. Your worth is still here. Christ died for you. He loves you. But we make choices that are all around here, but this hand never changes. This hand never always stays the same. And so I think that I'm like, if every person just knew that there was a God that loves them, and especially then beyond that, a Christ that died for their sins and for their pains, and just so they can experience life of the opposites, and I love how there's a talk about when Christ was on the cross that he was thinking of joy. He was thinking of us having joy in our lives, and the blessing that we had, that we get to be with Heavenly Father again, be with our families again. And so it's kind of a weird concept to think of when he was going to die and he was suffering, he was thinking of joy. Obviously, what? So, and I just think, like I say, it's the opposites, and realizing that if you're going to have pleasure, you're going to also experience pain. And so it just makes everything in life so much richer because, you know, I know for me, if I've been sick or something, then I'm like, oh my gosh, if I was well, I would be doing this and this. And then I am better. And I'm like, all right, now I got to get that thing done that I've been avoiding, actually, that I could have gotten done a couple months ago, even, or weeks ago. But since I was sick, I really wanted to get that done, right? Or, boy, I didn't realize what feeling good felt like till I was sick,
Yeah.
So there's always room for appreciation.
Yeah, opposition in all things. And it's so important for us to appreciate that. Yeah.
And I don't remember if I think I was talking to you guys about the Passion of the Christ and stuff, but I don't know if I told you, somebody was like, but why is it so graphic? It's like, because this is what happened. He was getting beaten and, whipped, and they were not nice to him. They were terrible to him, and persecuting, and I just think too that it was hard that he was trying to deliver these messages to them, and to me, obviously, he knew some of the things that were going to happen after he was gone because he told them. He talked about them about like their own deaths and stuff, and they were kind of like, "Did he really mean that, or was that a parable?" And I get it how people were like, "Well, but I'm not sure. Is that really what he meant?" Because it'd be pretty hard to hear somebody talking about your death,
Yeah.
Yeah, they kind of started hinting at that in this episode, and that was kind of I think that's good because it bothers me. It's eerie, but it is also inevitable. When they have the part where Christ is kind of like taken back for a second, and he realizes that he's perceiving blood on the walls of Jerusalem, and
Right.
and it's foreshadowing of what's going to happen. But then it's not like there was a physical reason. The blood, it just disappears, like he's hallucinating. And it's like Christ is starting to grasp what's going on. The audience is starting to prepare themselves for what they know is coming. So it's such an interesting way to do that, because it's not necessary. You don't have to put that in there, and yet it really does kind of set the tone for what it must have been like for Christ, and then also prepare us emotionally for what's going to come.
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
I'm looking forward to part 3. It's going to be good.
I don't know if I'm going to be able to see part 3, by the way. So the next time you do this, it might be Courtney, because I'm gonna be working and stuff. So I'm gonna try and squeeze in part 3. So hopefully that works out.
Yeah, hopefully. You can't miss the ending, right?
Yeah. Well, I'll see it one way or another. I just don't know if I'll see it.
But you have like a week when
by the time you want to talk about it and stuff.
Yeah, because
we're gonna try and figure it out.
3 came out this last Thursday, right?
Yeah. When do you guys plan to see it?
I don't know, because we're leaving for Salt Lake on Wednesday. Again.
Sandy, yeah.
Sandy is practically Salt Lake anyway. Anyways, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, that's another thing. I was like, man, we're getting really scheduled here, trying to.
Yeah, we're the same way. I guess
we probably should have seen it today.
No, I think we can see Tuesday. So did you guys take your kids with you this time?
What was that?
You guys take your kids with you again?
Oh yeah, we've been taking them every time. It's hard not to take them. They really like it.
Yeah.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Good thing you got a lot of kids around for now. You can enjoy it while it lasts.
I think it's been fun also because we're coming up on Easter to see all this beautiful stuff happening.
Yeah.
Before Easter, like tomorrow is Palm Sunday, right? And so that'll be fun to celebrate with our kids, because we've been trying to put more of those traditions in our worship, instead of it being like, oh yeah, by the way, it's Easter and the Easter bunny came, like trying to make it more. So this has been so fun just to see those traditions.
Yeah, I have some friends online, and they're talking about there's more people talking about doing Passover in the Christian tradition as well, which is, I've heard that before a few different times. I remember when some public and were saying like, hey, if you're interested, I'm going to do this with my family, and a few people chimed in. So I think that's an interesting tradition, and we've done stuff like that. We've never done the Passover, but we've tried to include other traditions, Christian traditions, Jewish traditions, if nothing else, just to be familiar with, what those things look like, because there's a lot of value in those things. Like they say that Christian is very strong in their faith, and that the Jewish community is very strong in their ritual, and that if you combine the two, then you have like the Christian spirituality and then the Jewish ritual richness come together, and it's really fun.
Well, it kind of reminds me, that's what you get in the temple. So like the temple is all symbolism, and so when you go there and you're not used to that, you're really taken back. So I think the beautiful thing is like it's starting to teach your children symbolism and how to learn in symbolism and inviting them, and then when they go to the temple, it's not so, oh, what is this? They're ready for it, and I think that's so beautiful.
Well, I think it's cool too that some people have said that they're talking to somebody who's Jewish, and they're like, "Yeah, but you know what? Jesus was Jewish too," and they're like, "Oh," and so then it like kind of brings down this kind of wall of them being like, "Okay, so I guess if I find out about him and learn a few things, like that's okay. He's Jewish, and so, and that's why I think it's been really interesting to me is finding out how many other types of faiths have a belief in Jesus Christ. They just believe that he's like a rabbi and a great pastor or something, or a great man of some kind, but they don't believe that he was like, the Messiah. So that's what's cool to me is when we put ourselves out there to learn and study a little bit more about other faiths rather than being like, oh, this is really weird or something. It's like, it might be different, but guess what? You might find out some things that are like, oh, that's like almost a similar thing to what we're doing, or oh, that makes a lot of sense, And so I think there's these kind of, in like delusional divisions that have happened and stuff. And so, I mean, I actually went to a church earlier. We had a gathering for our choir director, from back in the day. She was receiving an award. And I'm looking on this table and it's like, this church believes in this and this church believes in this. And I'm like, why? But they were like, you could tell they were like negative things. And I'm like, why? Why are you doing this? Like, what is this about? What's the point?
Yeah,
I mean, we talk
cool,
about
actually.
Yeah, like if you're not one, you're not mine. Like in the end, if we all believe in Christ, we need to work on becoming one, not divided.
Right.
And whatnot.
That would be interesting to do, though. Another thing about it, totally off topic from the live stream, but if you had a church that was doing that, but the things on the walls, so typically what they do is they'll have either like posters with the beliefs of different churches, or they'll have like a bunch of brochures that they wrote about the different churches. But what if you had something from the different churches that the churches themselves wrote? Not the church that they're posted in, but the church that they're talking about, right? So you imagine you walk into the foyer or whatever, and there's like an article of faith. We believe all this different stuff, signed the leader of that church next door. So you actually have like an authoritative description of what the other churches believe. That'd be pretty cool.
And like instead of like a he said, she said thing.
Yeah, instead of like this is our opinion of what they believe, it's what they believe in their own words posted in our church. And that'd be pretty cool.
One thing I do appreciate about our tradition or LDS culture is that we are invited to go get all the light everywhere, in every culture and every religion, and to bring it and to add upon what we have. And I really love that because I've met I have really good Christian friends, but they are very like, nope, you don't touch that. You don't go anywhere. I just stay within my box, and like, I can understand that because it creates this safety, but how much you're missing out on because of that, you know? So anyways, I just love that. I love that we are invited to go find all the light and truth everywhere, because it's in, just kind of like what you were saying, Melissa, about, now I just lost my mind, but about, in different religions, they respect Christ, and it would be so fun to go and study like what they believe and how they got there and whatnot. Like, I just think that's so beautiful to do that. And to learn to do it with like openness and curiosity instead of like trying to find a difference and trying to divide, right? It's just like,
Mhm.
like, I think you can see a difference with love, and it doesn't have to be about division. It's just like, explain that more to me. I am curious about that, you know?
Well, see, and I had a friend that taught me about Catholicism one day over at her house and stuff, and it was different. But my parents didn't tell me I couldn't go over there, and we've had conversations with our kids where they kind of felt like that we would not let them go and find out about other churches, and I'm like, well, of course we want you to keep coming to our church, but you could, yeah, if you want to go over to somebody else's church and find out about it, like, we're not going to stop you from doing that. Like, I've gone to other churches for like choir or different things like that and stuff. And so they were like, oh, I was like, yeah, so you thought that was taboo, but you didn't bother to ask. Okay. So I think that's the thing is, it's like, do we make sure that we are really, that we are showing like real, like genuine love and openness and stuff? Or do people or our kids have a reason to feel like we really aren't loving and inclusive of all different faiths? And I think that sometimes it's those things like we're stepping our way into becoming like a Pharisee, where we're just like, oh, well, that's wrong, they're not doing that right. And so it's that fine line of like, yeah, well, oh, that's interesting what they believe, but there's no reason to say anything negative about, because that's not Christ-like. I remember when we were sharing some stuff from General Conference, and they're like, why are these people protesting? And I know that Thomas was making a thing about, he's like, isn't that not American, like USA American, to be protesting for our right to our freedom of religion,
Yeah, I made the point that we live in a country that was based on freedom of religion. That's why people came here to begin with. And here you are trying to tell us that we shouldn't believe that. We shouldn't do but the other aspect of that is it's really not Christian. I mean,
so it's like, it's not American or Christian, actually.
You're out here destroying people's faith in the name of Christ. Okay, that doesn't even make sense, guys. Like that was, and the other thing is, so we went to General Conference last weekend, and that was one of the things that a lot of the protesters would never answer, because they were asked that question by several people while I was standing there. How is destroying other people's faith Christian?
Yeah, in their minds, having talked to them, in their minds, they are destroying the faith in the devil.
Yeah.
Like, you guys worship the devil, so if I destroy your faith, I'm actually doing you a favor. That's basically what it comes down to. And it's funny, just yesterday, I was talking to a coworker, and he was like, "Hey, I'm watching that show, American Primeval, with Brigham Young."
Oh,
And I was like, "Oh, cool. What do you think?" And he's like, like, obviously some of it is embellished, whatever. But I got a question, like, why Joseph Smith, like, died, was killed, and then Brigham Young brings all the saints to Utah. Why? Why did he do that? And I was like, oh, that's an interesting question. So in America, we believe in freedom of religion, and the government at the time failed. The governor failed. The governor failed, and then the president of the United States failed. And so Brigham Young said, we have to leave the country if we're going to survive. And Utah at the time was not a part of the Union. It was out of the nation.
Like not that long ago.
No, people forget Nauvoo was the edge of the wilderness at that time.
Yeah.
Like the edge of the world there.
The jumping off point.
And so in his mind, he was kind of putting those pieces of the puzzle together. And he was like, oh, okay, so America Primeval is, it's set outside of the United States. And the only reason Brigham Young there is because they were forced at gunpoint to leave. They didn't want to leave, but they were getting killed. They were getting murdered and massacred, and so they had to leave.
Well, the other part of that, though, is that the government then again intervened because they wanted what the saints had set up.
Yeah,
they wanted control of
that
territory. So I mean, that was, and the saints didn't want to give it to them.
Now there's a lot less mosquitoes.
A lot of problems.
Yeah, I just love the symbolism and how God really is the same yesterday, today, and forever. How it's like his people are being persecuted, and what does he do? He commands them to leave. I just love that so much.
Right.
Well, and that's what I think is amazing with like all the different populations of people that are moving around, and someday soon we'll know, what people went where and things that happen. But like we were talking about appreciation, it's like there's people that have lived in these refugee camps like their whole life, born, and their country has been in times of war, and that group that we're all a part of, and hearing somebody else who's a podcaster talking about like, okay, let me lay out what war is like for you, helping us to be a part of the spiritual war that's happening right now, and he's like, sorry, this is kind of graphic, but I was like, wow, thanks for the reality check. Okay, but it is a spiritual war. And I've heard a lot of people really realize that before then, but especially like 2020, it's like the other shoe dropped, and now it's like, okay, hear him. Who do you choose to listen to? And there's those that are choosing to find God and listen to him, and like I said, seek him out in all different forms, because in Jerusalem, as the one for Israel was saying, that it's more taboo to look at this like Eastern or Christian, this American or whatever God that was not this Messiah that they say wasn't the Messiah. But then people were really looking at it and really understanding scripture, because they couldn't do a lot of other things, and they were like, this is the Messiah, and so I just think that it's like, it's amazing how God is able to work and get people to where they can find him. And, and I can't imagine what it is for some of these people in other countries, especially to choose to follow Christ and know they're going to lose their life. That the odds are not in their favor, but they're like, but you know what? If I die, I know where I'm going. So yay. Oh, yay. Like that's just not reality for us. Yeah, we're going to go to church. We might get blown up anyways, but that's what then will be good,
Yeah, it still takes courage.
Yeah, there's this really good book called The War in Heaven Still Continues. And it's all about that. Like what we fought for there is just this is just an extension of that. And that's a really good book. I highly recommend it. I had another thought. But it left me, so it must not be that important. Darn it.
Yeah, my time's up anyway. So I appreciate the ability to be able to chat about some of this stuff with you guys, because it's not everybody that's interested in even going to see The Chosen. It boggles my mind when I go to church and I'm like, you guys going? And they're like, going to what? And I'm like, what? You guys don't even know? It's boggles my mind. But I appreciate that you guys are excited about it and we can talk about it.
Yep, and then it's cool because you get to connect with other people. And so, and it's just this, it's easy. It's easy once they're like, oh yeah, I love that show. So
Yeah.
anyways, all right. Well, thanks guys. It's good to
All
see
right,
you again.
have a good night.
All right,
Yeah.
you too. Have a
See you
good night.
guys.
We'll see you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.